There's a parking lot I used to walk through every morning on my way into an office building, and I remember noticing something that didn't quite add up at the time. The lot was split into two sections, visitor parking up front and employee parking in the back, and every single day, the visitor section was full of shiny late-model cars, while the employee section was a graveyard of scratched bumpers and faded paint. At first, I thought nothing of it. Then, one afternoon, I found out who actually owned some of those beat-up cars in the back. One was a department head who'd quietly paid off his house. Another was a woman who had maxed out her 401k contributions for 11 straight years. The guy with the brand-new leased Audi and visitor parking, he was there pitching a startup that was already out of money. That parking lot never looked the same to me after that. My name is Daniel, and I've spent a long time trying to understand why the story we tell ourselves about money is so consistently backwards. Not in big dramatic ways, not like blowing your savings on a yacht, but in these quiet, socially acceptable patterns that feel completely normal right up until the moment you do the math on them. And one of the clearest examples of this is something so ordinary that most people never think twice about it: what kind of car you choose to drive and for how long. Here's the part that nobody really talks about. A car is not just a financial decision, it's a confession. It reveals something about how you think time works. And I don't mean that in a motivational poster kind of way. I mean it very literally. The decision to upgrade a car every few years versus the decision to keep one running for a decade are not two versions of the same choice. They come from completely different mental frameworks. And those frameworks tend to show up everywhere else in a person's financial life too. Let's start with something most people have been trained to ignore. When you buy a new car and then replace it in 3 or 4 years, you're essentially paying the most expensive rent imaginable for something you'll never fully own. The first 2 or 3 years of a car's life are when it drops fastest in value. We're talking 30 to 40% of what you paid, sometimes more, just gone into the air while the car sat in your driveway being normal. Then, after year 5 or 6, that rate of loss slows down dramatically. The car stabilizes. It becomes predictable. Repair costs go up a little, sure, but the actual cost per mile driven, when you account for everything, tends to fall. Most people hand their car off right before it becomes genuinely affordable to own and then restart the expensive part of the cycle from scratch. They do this repeatedly for decades, and the financial damage is enormous in ways that don't feel like damage because it's spread out in monthly installments that are easy to absorb and easy to ignore. Think about what that actually costs in real terms. The average new car payment in America right now is somewhere around $750 to $800 a month. Let's just call it $750 to be conservative. Over 5 years, that's $45,000 in payments alone, not counting insurance, which is higher on newer cars, not counting registration fees, not counting the interest on the loan. Now imagine a different person who paid off a car 5 years ago and has been driving it ever since. Their monthly car cost dropped to maybe $150 in average maintenance and the occasional repair. That's a $600 difference every single month. Over 5 years, if that $600 went into a basic index fund, you're looking at somewhere between $40,000 and $45,000, depending on market conditions. And that's a conservative scenario. Do that across 2 or 3 cycles of what would have been car upgrades, and you're talking about a number that starts to look like a down payment on a second property, or a year of living expenses, or a bridge to retiring earlier than you thought possible. And here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because this is where the psychology enters the picture. The people who keep their cars the longest are almost never doing it because they can't afford a new one. Research into financial habits of high net worth households, people with actual accumulated wealth, not just high incomes, consistently finds that they drive ordinary cars for a long time. Not always, but often enough to be notable. The pattern isn't poverty, it's priority. There's a mental habit these people share, which is that they're much more interested in what something is worth in 10 years than what it signals today. They've essentially opted out of the performance of prosperity and focused instead on the architecture of it. That's a subtle but enormous difference. There's also something interesting happening with the people on the other side of this equation. Behavioral economics have a concept called present bias. which is just a technical way of saying that humans are wired to value what we can experience right now far more heavily than an equivalent benefit we'd receive in the future. A new car is present bias in its purest form. The feeling of driving something new, that smell, the updated dashboard, the sense that you've arrived somewhere, those things are real. They hit immediately. The cost of that feeling, spread across years of payments and lost investment growth, is abstract and distant and easy to discount. The human brain is not naturally equipped to weigh those two things fairly, and the entire automotive financing industry has been built around that exact flaw in our wiring. If you're finding this interesting and want more content about the behavioral side of money, hitting subscribe takes 2 seconds, and it actually helps this channel reach more people who think about these things seriously. Now, I want to be honest about something, because this conversation can go sideways into a kind of financial puritanism that I don't think is useful. The point is not that new cars are bad, or that you should drive something dangerous or unreliable for the sake of an ideological stance. The point is much simpler than that. Most people have never sat down and actually calculated what their car replacement habit cost them over a lifetime. They've made one of the biggest recurring financial decisions of their adult lives entirely on feel, on what their coworkers drive, on what they think they deserve, on a monthly payment that got smoothed into their budget so gradually they stopped noticing it was there. That's the part worth examining, not the car itself, but the absence of a decision around it. There's a version of this that shows up in people's thinking about reliability too. The conventional wisdom is that older cars are money pits. And look, there's a kernel of truth in that for specific makes and models, but across the board, the data does not support the idea that keeping a paid-off, reliable car is more expensive than financing a new one. A repair bill of $1,200 feels catastrophic in the way that a $750 monthly payment doesn't, but one of those is actually 4 times larger than the other when you annualize it. We're bad at comparing lump sum costs to recurring ones, and that cognitive glitch is doing a lot of work in keeping people locked into the upgrade cycle. What a 10-year-old car actually says to you when it belongs to someone who made a deliberate choice to keep it is that you've developed a tolerance for mild social discomfort in exchange for real financial freedom. It says that you're playing a longer game than the people around you might realize. It says that you understand the difference between what wealth looks like from the outside and what it actually feels like from the inside, and that you've chosen the second one. That's not a small thing. In a culture that has turned consumption into a form of identity, opting out of a status signal as visible as a car is genuinely countercultural. You won't get praised for it. You might even get pitied for it by people who have no idea what your balance sheet looks like. But here's what I've noticed about people who've been doing this quietly for years. They don't feel deprived. They feel steady. There's a kind of low-level financial anxiety that disappears when your monthly obligations drop and your savings rate climbs. And a lot of people don't even realize that anxiety was there until it's gone. The car payment you don't have is an invisible asset. It doesn't show up on any statement, but you feel it every month in a way that's hard to explain until you've experienced it. So wherever you are right now with this, whether you're driving something 10 years old that you're slightly embarrassed about in the office parking lot, or you're about to sign paperwork on something new because the timing felt right, I just ask you to run the actual numbers before you decide. Not the payment, the total cost, including everything you won't invest because the payment exists. That calculation has a way of changing the conversation pretty quickly. Subscribe if you want to keep having it, because this is exactly the kind of thing I come back to here. Now, tell me something. What's the car habit you've never actually done the math on? Drop it in the comments, because I have a feeling the answers are going to be more interesting than anyone expects.